Ah, what happened there? Let's start that countdown. All right, welcome everybody to you're not late at all, Tig Master Meister. Welcome everybody to this Super Bowl anniversary edition of Under the Dome. Yeah, today is 13 years since that game over there was played. Um, and it's Super Bowl week, and I'm not even remotely excited about Super Bowl week. I really am not. There hasn't been any. Well, there has been news. I mean, an Eagles player got arrested.
Yeah.
Joe Mixon got arrested, and then it looks like the charges got dropped, which that was a weird thing that was going on. So but as far as just news, I mean, it's Tuesday already. I guess tomorrow's the day they meet with reporters for media day, but I really didn't hear very much at all. So I don't know. How do you feel about this upcoming Super Bowl?
The same. And yeah, Alan, I'll be honest, and I know you're the same way. Through most of my life, somebody could just name a year and ask me who played in that Super Bowl or name the number. Super Bowl 8 or whatever, and I would instantly be able to tell you who played in it, who won, what the score was, who was the most valuable player. Since about, I don't know, maybe Super Bowl 44, I really have to sit down and think, and do reverse math or something like that, and then I can't remember the score all the time. I'm talking basically the last 10 or 12 years, 10 or 12 Super Bowls. And I feel the same way this year. The NFL has sapped me of wanting to watch the NFL. I think it could potentially be a good game, although I personally think that Philadelphia has the capability of blowing this one open. But it's an intriguing matchup. I have no doubt that Goodell's referees will make sure that they keep it close. The days of blowout Super Bowls year in and year out, I think are a thing of the past, and in Goodell's new world, because he's got to make sure for money value, that doesn't happen. So I expect a close game. If you're looking for my official prediction, I'm going to go Philadelphia 31, Kansas City 17. I don't see a way Kansas City's defense stops the Eagles, and the Eagles probably have the best defense that the Chiefs have faced. And teams that have had success against Philadelphia's defense have been able to do it on the ground. You ain't going to get Kansas City running the football. So you're talking strength versus strength. In recent years, the defense almost always wins that one. So I guess we'll get my official Super Bowl prediction out of the way. But am I excited? No, not at all.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I mean, I watched, because of YouTube now, I watched the actual broadcast of Super Bowl 11. I tried to sit through all 12. I felt so bad for Craig Morton. My God, the NFL films made it look bad. He looked a lot worse watching the replay of the entire game. But I watched a lot of the early Super Bowls. I watched Super Bowl 3. I watched Super Bowl 4, which actually is really interesting because a guy really sat there and took the time and put this thing together using NFL films, the actual audio of the game, and it jumps from black and white to color. It has the halftime show. All of it is in there. And the only reason why the halftime show is interesting because it was played in Tulane Stadium. That is the game that they reenacted the Battle of New Orleans. it's a weird thing to see. I mean, it's a long show too, because it's like the Orange Bowl, how the Orange Bowl used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Huge halftime thing. It was all the celebration of Louisiana and New Orleans because it was their first Super Bowl. Um, so they go through all the various histories in New Orleans. And when they do the Battle of New Orleans, that's the game. That's the scene where the guy was loading the cannon and it accidentally went off and it blew part of his hand off and it blew the can. He was pushing the powder in and that's how it went off. It
Yeah.
shot the stick back out at him. So yeah, and they sort of mention it, but they don't mention it. They mention it as an accident. And then they got guys laying on the ground, and then the Southern marching band comes through, and they're marching around these people who are supposed to be dead on the ground. It's really bizarre, but I highly recommend people watch it. You just sit and watch this thing, and he splices NFL films footage, complete with all the stuff that Hank Stram's wired for. So it's great. You know, he's going 65 toss power trap, 65 toss power trap might break wide open, rats. And you see the actual play, and it's Pat Summerall. He's not play by play. He's the color analyst. I think it's um, who is it? It's not Bart Scott. I forgot who is it. It's not Kurt Gowdy either. Because Kurt Gowdy was on NBC at the time.
Yeah.
But it's a traditional announcer, and it's not Jack Buck, but that's much later. Jack Buck and Pat Summerall together. But yeah, but it's really weird to watch because there's not much analysis going on. They're just talking. So I watch that, and I watch Super Bowl V. That's not very fun to watch. And in fact, I think they pulled that now. Super Bowl VI, I tried to watch that. Try to watch all the New Orleans Super Bowls in Tulane Stadium because I wanted to see the aerial shots of the city. There's not too many of them because the blimp wasn't even that popular back then.
Right.
The blimp kind of comes in later on. So when you get to Super Bowl X, which is a fun Super Bowl to watch.
Yeah.
That's where you see the blimp a lot more, and you see a lot more above shots. So it's good. We're not missing anything important, Anna. I haven't watched the State of the Union since probably George W. Bush in 2001. Somewhere around there is probably the last time I watched the State of the Union. Exactly. Nobody's missing it. I'm not. Yeah, not for me. Not for me. Anyway, let's talk a little about because I'm like you. That whole long-winded explanation was basically to say I'm like you. I used to be able to just rattle them off, and then in the '80s, I knew what Super Bowls were played, but they were the blowout Super Bowls. And then in the '90s, I think it's where it started to fall apart for me. I had with after 30, which is Pittsburgh and Dallas, who's 31? I think that's the Packers and Patriots, and 32 is the Packers and the Broncos. And then I'm going, okay, so if you told me 35, I'm going, I don't know, that kind of thing. Yeah. And it's funny because the Super Bowls have actually, probably because of Goodell, but the Super Bowls have actually been closer than the blowout Super Bowls of the 80s and the early 90s. I mean, the Cowboys, Buffalo Bills one. The only thing I really remember out of the first one is Leon Lett getting run down behind by Don Beebe. And I don't even remember the score of that game. And then the second one, Thurman Thomas can't find his helmet.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I remember of those games. So, but this Super Bowl here, it's a Super Bowl I never thought I'd ever see. It was a Super Bowl that it never occurred to me that we were going to lose this game. It's the weirdest thing. I felt like, and it's Peyton Manning, okay? And,
right.
The time I'm going, we're not going to lose this game. There's no way we're going to this game and we're losing it. And, I mean, my dad is an old school fan of the Saints. And um when Indianapolis jumped off 10-0 on the Saints, my dad's like, "Well, they said it was going to be a blowout. You know, that's what they said was going to happen." And I'm going, "No, no, it's not going to be a blowout." And I've told the story on this show before, but my dad had gotten up to go to the bathroom or whatever, and we're all at his house, my mom and dad, and my dad walks in front of the TV just as Tracy Porter picks off that pass. So live, all I saw was my dad's backside as he's screaming because he's standing in front of the TV going, "Go, go, boy, go, go." I'm just like, "What's happening? Move your ass," that kind of thing. So it was at that moment, I knew we won the game, the Tracy Porter interception. And I went a little crazy after that thing was over with. I kind of, this was my thing, okay? When the Saints won the Super Bowl, I was buying and recording everything that could possibly be Super Bowl related. So I've got this.
Nice.
I've got this book with the ring on the back, okay? Let's see. I got this. And this is just samples of what I got. That's what the Times Picayune put together. And they did this a lot. So this is from 2006. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's how it's 2006. Aside from Breeze's jersey, it's Katrina, and they even did it back in 2000. This is the one where they won after they won the first playoff game. So and look who's on the back. Ryan Milne, So I've always gotten, this is written by Buddy D'Alberto. So I've always gotten all that stuff. And I've got the programs. I bought Sports Illustrated. I bought every magazine that was Super Bowl related. I bought all those anniversary Super Bowl things. I got a subscription to Sports Illustrated just so I can get the football.
Yeah.
With the score and everything else like that on there. But, this book here, though, this is, every Saints fan should try and get a hold of this book. This is written by Wayne Mack. Wayne Mack was the voice of the Saints on WGSO radio from 1970. Let's see, Al Wester, that's the one you hear on the radio call when Tom Dempsey kicks the field goal. Al Wester was there, I think, to 72 or 73, and then Wayne Mack took over. And Wayne Mack was on until 1980. I think that's when Larry Matson and Jim Henderson came into the picture. But old school helmet in the back too. But this is the history of the first 25-year history of the Saints. And it's broken down by coaching. So, you got a lot of old pictures in here, a lot of great stuff. But, a lot of the stories like this is John North. Okay. But a lot of the stories I repeat on this show come out of this book that I went out in this book, that Wayne Mack really did a great job going through the history of the club. And that's why I say people should read it, because it really helps understand the first 25 years of the franchise. And I bring that out because you read this, and my dad, I remember when I got that book, it came out in 1992. When I got that book, my dad was always like, "Why are you reading that shit? That shit just pisses me off thinking about that stuff." That book is why that game matters so much.
Yes.
Because that game justifies everything that you lived through, as horrible as that first 25 years of the Saints. So it was special. It really, I can just remember my mom sitting there saying, "I can't believe we won a Super Bowl. I cannot believe we won this game. We won a Super Bowl." And yeah, you never would have thought that was going to be the case. So, and for what it's worth, I'm seeing what you guys are writing on the side here. We're going to talk about Derek Carr in a minute, but I'm picking Kansas City just because I I can't go against Mahomes right now. And I think Goodell's probably going to kind of put his thumb on the scale a little bit if this game gets out of hand.
Very
Um,
possible.
I think Philadelphia has a good chance of shutting down Patrick Mahomes, but I think that ankle is going to be the key.
Yeah.
If he can move on that ankle, he can make something happen late in the game. So I think it's going to be a good game. I'm not very excited about it. I mean, I got a friend who's a Philadelphia Eagles fan, and he's sky high, but I'm just like, yeah, whatever.
Mhm.
um, but so let's talk first about. I saw the shirt you have on today. You've got a Denver Broncos shirt
I
on.
do.
Um, let's talk about Peyton, because Peyton was the last link to that club, to that
Hmm.
that championship. All the players are retired, and Peyton is now putting together a staff. First off, let me ask you, what do you think about the compensation the Broncos gave? Do you think that's a fair compensation? Some people are mad. They wanted a first rounder next year. How do you feel about this?
And I wouldn't have had a problem with a first rounder next year. In fact, I've mentioned it in the past that I thought that might be what the Saints end up pushing for. It would have been a roll of the dice. I mean, the Denver Broncos are a bad football team. Was one of the
Mm-hmm.
reasons why they were looking for a head coach. Um, so if you're New Orleans, maybe you gamble. I mean, obviously the Broncos' fifth overall pick, what would have been the fifth overall pick, wasn't in play because that belonged to Seattle because of the trade for Russell Wilson. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Not that the Broncos would have traded a top 5, top 10 pick anyway. So maybe you gamble and you think to if you're Mickey Loomis, you think, you know what? I'm looking at that Broncos roster, and we know Sean Payton is a great head coach. Yeah, we know what he did his first year here, but we're going to gamble that he is not a miracle worker his first year in Denver. And maybe push. If it's me, I would have pushed for a second round pick this year in 2023 and a first round pick in 2024. Because I still would have had the ammunition. Because a second round pick from the Broncos would have taken you from the 29th overall to like the 37, 36, 37, 38, somewhere in that range. So you're not losing that much ground. So if you're looking to trade up in the first round, you still have roughly the same amount of ammunition to do it. That's just me. But at the same time, if you are maybe thinking that a first round talented or a quarterback worth a late first round pick, such as Hendon Hooker, that you might have your eyes on to get that fifth year option, then coming out of this thing with the 29th overall pick is not that bad. I can't say I like giving up the third round pick, basically swapping a second round and a third round. That almost feels like they cancel each other out, especially if the Saints have a bad year. But for the people that were thinking that you were going to come away with this with a John Gruden type haul, a couple of firsts, a couple of seconds, and a whole bunch of cash. Guys, and Alan and I have called you this before. Anybody that thought that, you were delusional. It wasn't going to happen. I don't think the market for Sean Payton was nearly what the Saints thought it was going to be. It wasn't nearly what I thought it was going to be. I thought there were going to be a lot more callers for him. All things considered, I think the Saints got what they could out of it. And anybody that tells me that the Saints lost this trade, you got a first round pick that you didn't have. You got another second round pick that you didn't have for a guy that was on your payroll that wasn't going to do anything for you anymore.
Yeah.
You won this trade. Now, Sean Payton wins the Super Bowl or turns the Broncos back into perennial contenders, and you blow these draft picks, then you've lost that trade. But currently, as we sit here now, before any other game is played, you have to say that the Saints won this trade.
That's just it. I think a lot of people that feel like the Saints lost this trade wanted 2 first-rounders. First off, they thought they were going to get a John Gruden type of deal. They thought they were going to take a team to the cleaners. Well, you got to look at these other teams. Mike Lynn, who is the guy who did the Herschel Walker trade, he was a GM for the Vikings in the Herschel Walker trade. Mike Lynn doesn't work for teams anymore.
Right.
A team that's going to trade for Sean Payton, Payton's going to want picks to rebuild that team.
Exactly.
There is no team out there that's like, oh, you know what? We don't need those friggin' picks. We're just a coach away from winning the Super Bowl. That team isn't out there looking for a head coach. And that's the part that people didn't get. There was no way the Cardinals were trading that 3rd overall pick. It was never happening. The Texans brought back a guy from home. They brought back D'Amico Ryans, who was a linebacker, star linebacker for them. That's like us bringing Jonathan Vilma in.
Mm-hmm.
It's like us bringing in Sam Mills or Ricky Jackson or Pat Swilling, one of those guys in. It was that's how he was beloved in Houston. Okay. And there's the racial component. And, you have to take that in consideration, given the Rooney Rule, given the spotlight, especially after last year with Brian Flores. If the Texans are replacing a black head coach with a white head coach, there was going to be hell to pay for that. I'm sorry. That's a reality. The Panthers are already catching crap for bringing in a proven head coach, but he's not good enough, in Frank Reich. So, again, you're not going to get the Texans. And the Texans, I thought, were the best opportunity because at least you could have got maybe the 12th overall pick.
You had a shot.
Yeah, you got 2 first-rounders this year and 2 next year, thanks to the Dolphins. All right. The jobs that Peyton really wanted, the Chargers, I'll throw Dallas in there. Those jobs never opened up.
Right.
So your market now is shrinking. Who is Sean Payton going to go to? He's not going to go to the Panthers because the Panthers, they're going to get the screw you price. We're going to take 3 number 1s from you. If you really want Sean Payton and we're going to have to face him twice a year, give us 3 number 1s.
Yeah.
We're going to destroy the Panthers. So you're not going to get that one. So where else are you going to go? He's not going to go to Indianapolis. He has no interest in that team. That team, and that team didn't even ask for him. So, it's just that. So you're stuck with Denver, and Denver doesn't have very much left because they've given away 5 picks now, 3 for Russell Wilson and 2 now for Sean Payton.
Yep.
So I get wanting a first next year because you think, okay, I could possibly tank this year, have 2 first-rounders. The Broncos probably aren't going to be very good. I'm in a good position. Maybe I can trade both of them to move up to number 1 overall and get Caleb Williams and a new coaching staff. That's a lot of ifs, wishing, and that kind of stuff.
Right.
And knowing the Saints, I told the story about the Philadelphia Eagles, why they booed Santa Claus and pummeled him with snowballs.
Yeah.
I told the story. Okay, that's a good example of a tank. You screwed up a tank. You're tanking for O.J. Simpson. And then they start winning meaningless games. So they lose O.J. Simpson to the Buffalo Bills. So now you got nothing.
Yeah.
That's what would have happened to the Saints. They would have ruined their own tank, and Denver probably wins 8 or 10 games. That other first round pick is down at the bottom, towards the bottom in the 20s. So, I mean, just you take what you can get.
Yep.
So Peyton's putting his staff together, and they took they're taking Zach Strief as his offensive line coach. He's talking about interested in taking Ronald Curry. How do you feel about these coaches that are leaving? And we'll talk about the defensive coaches in a minute, but I know these offensive coaches leaving.
And you mentioned Ronald Curry. I believe he met with the Broncos today. He's also looking at Declan Doyle, and Kevin Petrie, the two other offensive assistants. First, I want to address, and 90% of it is coming off Facebook. People are asking, why would the Saints let this happen, or how could the Saints let this happen? Guys, the Saints can't control this.
Mm-hmm.
Let's address Zach Strief first. Strief was very highly thought of within the New Orleans organization, obviously by Payton. I mean, Payton's not only the one that hired him now, Payton's the one that drafted him in 2006. Payton's the one that talked him into coming out of the broadcast booth to coach for his team in the first place. But Zach Strief got hired as the offensive line coach for Denver. Zach Strief had previously been the assistant offensive line coach for New Orleans. The only way New Orleans could have possibly blocked this would be to promote Zach Strief. Because in the NFL, and I've said it to people, I don't know how many times today, but these things, these holes on the side of your head, if you let them work, they process information. They do.
I know.
In the NFL, teams can't just randomly hire assistant coaches from other teams unless it's in a promotional role. If it's a lateral move, then the previous team, the New Orleans Saints, could block it then if you choose to, or they would get some kind of compensation, usually future draft, but low round draft picks, things like that. So that's the situation that we're in. So the Saints couldn't realistically say no. They couldn't realistically say no for the Broncos' request to interview Ronald Curry. I mean, they technically could, but you know what happens then? Then Curry resigns, goes and interviews with Denver, and gets the promotional position anyway. As far as how I think, what I think about it, losing Strief hurts because I think he was an up and comer. I think he and Doug Marrone did a wonderful job with Cesar Ruiz, developing him from a year ago. But the thing is, again, the only way you were going to stop Strief from leaving is if you're going to let go of Marrone. And Marrone is highly respected, not only in that building, but throughout the league. The simple fact is Doug Marrone is a better football coach than Zach Strief is right now. So you needed to keep Marrone. As far as Ronald Curry, I personally believe you need to do whatever you can to keep Ronald Curry in the building. But Curry's being interviewed for the offensive coordinator spot. Who holds that spot in New Orleans? Pete Carmichael. And yeah, I know everybody wants Pete Carmichael fired, and I get it, and I understand why. But Dennis Allen, Mickey Loomis, and Gail Benson have all already announced that Pete Carmichael would at least be retained. They didn't technically say in what role. So perhaps what we could see happen is if the Saints will give Curry a chance to speak to Denver if he hasn't already. And then if they want to keep him in the building, like I'm hearing that they do, then maybe they kick Carmichael to a senior offensive consultant or whatever, and then promote Curry. If Sean Payton wants Curry, folks, that's the only way the Saints are going to be able to keep Ronald Curry. And actually, I would not mind that scenario one bit. I like Curry a lot. He's a hot name among all teams throughout the league right now.
And that's the thing too. People have to realize that the Saints are pushing people for promotions. The reason why we know so much about Kai Hartley right now is that the Saints are putting his name out there because they want to give him a GM position in the league.
Yeah.
This is the part that people don't understand because they look at it from the fan perspective, not from a business perspective. You've got talent there that you think has an opportunity to go somewhere and be productive. They did this with Ryan Pace. They did this with Terry Fontenot. And people's attitude is, well, you don't let good talent walk out the building. You do if you feel like that's the best thing for that person's future. Because you're confident in your ability to find new talent that replaces them.
Yeah.
And that's the part that people don't quite get. And that'll lead us into the defensive guys that are leaving. A lot of names that people really respected and enjoyed on this team are leaving. They've parted ways with Chris Richard, who I thought was going to end up being defensive coordinator. They parted ways with the secondary coach, who I thought was pretty good, and they spoke highly of him. Corey Robertson, I believe his name was.
Yes.
They let Ryan Nielsen, who they blocked from going to LSU, they let him go to Atlanta. So, and the guys they're bringing in, again, this shouldn't surprise people, because why is Payton interviewing Saints assistants? Because those are the guys he knows.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Dennis Allen knows these guys that he's bringing in that he coached with at the Raiders. But people are like, yeah, Ayton, whatever. This is the kind of coaches we want. We want to rebuild the Raiders coaching staff here. You are and you aren't. Like I posted on Twitter. Remember the guy, the Saints' worst defensive coordinator in history, who set a league record, not a franchise record, a league record for most yardage given up in a single season, is coaching in his 4th Super Bowl this Sunday. Steve Spagnuolo, and he's got 2 rings already. He's going for his 3rd. He lost to Tampa, but he's going for his 3rd. And the Chiefs' defense is not historically bad. So I'm not thrilled about these coaches, but I'm also not treating it like the sky is falling. These guys are respected in the league, and the Saints front office is not the Raiders front office.
Right.
They're not going to do the things the Raiders do. So let me ask you, what do you think of these defensive coaches? I know these were guys you didn't want to lose, especially you don't want to lose Michael Hodges, the linebacker coach.
Yeah, I know you've seen me say that over and over and over and over and over again. And Hodges is going to be the guy that I'm worried that Payton is going to poach. I think they can recover from anybody else on that staff, even Curry. Hodges would be of the remaining coaches. Hodges would be the biggest loss, in my opinion. The biggest mistake, the biggest mistake Dennis Allen made coming right out of the gate last year was naming Chris Richard and Ryan Nielsen co-defensive coordinators.
Yeah.
Because what that did, that left too many hands in the cookie jar, because we all knew that Allen was going to continue to control the defense anyway. So now you have 3 hands jammed in that little jar. B, what did I say before, folks, about assistant coaches and from a lateral to a promotional move? Well, Ryan Nielsen was a co-defensive coordinator and now gets the job with the Atlanta Falcons. So again, yes, you couldn't block that. You lost Richard because of philosophical differences. You don't have to read between the lines there. Richard wanted more control over game day play calls. You aren't getting that as long as Dennis Allen is holding on to this job.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was a move. I like Richard. I loved Ryan Nielsen, but those were moves that you couldn't avoid happening. And you look at it from Dennis Allen's perspective. He inherited this staff. And he worked with all those guys for, 12 years, however long Allen has been with the Saints organization total. But we don't know the exact quality of the working relationships with all of them. You would think that they're obviously civil, and certainly some are better than others. But take it from me, folks. I accepted one coaching job in my career where I was informed after I was offered the job, oh, let me introduce you to your assistants. What? Now I'm the head coach, right? Any head coach worth their salt wants a say in who their assistants are going to be. Why? Because if they screw up, you're the one that gets fired. That's just reality. And I'll tell you from my own experience, I have been in other interviews since then where my first question is, how much control do I have over my assistants? And if I don't like the answer, the interview has ended right then and there. Dennis Allen didn't need to necessarily draw that line. But after 1 year of an inherited staff, he now gets an opportunity to put his personal stamp on. You can say he's bringing in his guys, but just like Alan said, of course you're going to want to work with guys who you know. You're insane not to, or at least investigate that possibility. And Joe Woods is a good defensive mind. Todd Grantham is a very respected defensive line coach, although most of it at the collegiate level. Dennis Allen is still going to be in control of this defense. In fact, the organization has said as much. So, you weren't going to get this all-star defensive coordinator, to either stay if you're talking about Chris Richard, or to come into the building if you're talking about throughout the league. So you had to get a guy that was willing to work with Dennis Allen, that Dennis Allen knew, and therefore would have a good relationship with. So I think on paper, guys, this is not a bad-looking staff. And I know what everybody is saying. The defense wasn't the problem last year. Yeah, you're right, it wasn't. But that run defense was a hell of a lot worse, and we have seen it probably since the Spagnuolo days. So they need making changes on that side of the ball might not be the worst thing in the world. The guy that was still in control of the entire defense is still in the building. You don't want him as head coach. I get it, but he still is. He's still going to be in charge of your defense going into next year. That part hasn't changed.
I think the whole time you're talking, I think about this. Curtis Johnson was a coach I really, really liked on the staff. Wide receivers coach for the Saints. Dennis Allen let him go. That was one of his first moves, and promoted. It's Cody Burns.
They brought in Cody Burns from Tennessee.
And I was really worried about this, because the reputation that Curtis Johnson has, developing receivers, and the receivers he has developed. You go back to his days when he was at University of Miami, and then even into New Orleans with guys like Lance Moore, like Marcus Colston. He really developed a lot of great receivers for the Saints, and he was part of the reason why Drew Brees could grab bag boys and put them at receiver, and they're still going to catch a handful of passes. But then you look at the 2021 Saints and how bad that receiving core was.
Yeah.
None of those guys developed. Even Callaway was probably, if you look at him compared to Rashid Shaheed this year, Callaway did not develop like they'd hoped at all. And Juwan Johnson's elevation as just a converted wide receiver to somebody who can play tight end, he's not in the elite category by any stretch of imagination, but he can play tight end. So getting Cody Burns in the offense, that has made a difference. We talked already about Ruiz and Pat and Doug Marrone coming in, making him a better player. Carmichael, I get it. People want Carmichael out the door. They want to see a new offense come in. I don't know what's going to happen with that. I would not be surprised, like you, that Carmichael gets promoted or changed to assistant head coach and offensive designer, or some kind of fancy title they give, and Ronald Curry becomes offensive coordinator or offensive play caller, not even officially coordinator, but a play caller.
Yeah.
It's all these. There's lots of moves they can make, but the point is, like you said, Allen's bringing in his guys, and he's going to put together his staff where he's the sole voice. He's not competing against that guy on TV right now. He's not Sean Payton, and you're not looking at him being Sean Payton. And I think that was part of his problem this past year, was too many people looking for Sean Payton. That doesn't mean that Dennis Allen is going to be successful. It doesn't mean that proves Dennis Allen can be a good head coach. All it means is Dennis Allen, to me, Dennis Allen is putting together a staff that he thinks he can work with.
Yeah.
And that's all you can ask for right now. There's a lot of people, I think, that are mad. Yeah, and I agree with that. I mean, but I think they also felt they were handicapped by the roster. Um, and I think that they're going to make a lot of changes to the roster too. I think that was the message that we got when they kept Allen and Carmichael, is that it's the roster we have, not so much what we're doing. What we're doing can work, but not with these players.
Yeah.
And that leads us into the next segue. Derek Carr. You know, Derek Carr, the Raiders have given the Saints permission to meet with him. Derek Carr has a no trade clause, so he dictates where he gets to go. And right now, the Saints are the only team that is meeting with him. Anna asked a question earlier. It sounds like the Saints have agreed to compensation for a trade. Why would the Saints trade for Derek Carr when they can just wait for the Raiders to cut him? Why would you want to trade him right now?
It's very simple. There's a deadline of February 15th where a major bonus, in fact, the majority of Derek Carr's contract will be guaranteed. And the Raiders will have to take some kind of mammoth salary cap hit or something like that. That's if Derek Carr is still on the roster by February 15th. Much the same way Michael Thomas's contract, if he's still with the team by March 17th, kind of thing. So I mean, you could play the long wait. If you're the Saints or anybody for that matter, and just sit back and say, oh yeah, we'll wait till the Raiders release Carr. And then we'll negotiate with him at a more team friendly salary cap deal. If you do that, you risk another team swooping in and making a trade for Derek Carr before February 15th. And I realize what you said, and up to this point, the Saints have been the only team to even ask permission to speak to Carr. But life in the NFL changes very fast. Just look at the Sean Payton saga, where you were hearing different BS, almost by the hour on those last couple of days. So by making a move to try to trade for Derek Carr now, you're controlling what happens. And just because you're sitting down, whatever Vegas is asking for him. And Jeremy Fowler of ESPN is actually reporting that he believes that it's going to be a third round pick and maybe a conditional day 3 pick. So that's not bad compensation to get for a proven NFL starter. So again, you're going to, if you're the Saints, you're going to agree to whatever Las Vegas is asking right now, because that opens the door for you to talk to Carr. That doesn't mean that the trade is going to happen. That doesn't even mean that you're still agreeable to what Vegas is asking for. If you sit down with Carr, you like what he has to say, he likes what you have to say. Those things can still change. It just means you understand what the Las Vegas Raiders are asking for right now, and you now have the opportunity to talk to Derek Carr. I hope I made sense.
No, you made absolutely perfect sense, because here's the other thing too. How many teams are looking for a quarterback right now? Well, the entire NFC South is.
Yeah, for starters.
Yeah, you got the Bucks, Falcons, Panthers, and Saints all need a starting quarterback. All right. The Jets are not happy with Zach Wilson, so they're looking for a new starter. The Washington Commanders or Redskins are looking for a new starter. So there's a lot of Aaron Rodgers once out of Green Bay. Are they going to turn over to Jordan Love, or are they going to look for a starter? Miami, what's going to happen with Tua? We really don't know.
Right.
So they're in the market for a quarterback as well. It's not critical for them, but they would like to have an opportunity to get a proven starter. So you don't have to hook your wagon to Tua. That's something that, as a free agent, you may have the cash for it. You may want to go ahead and do that. And then it becomes a bidding war.
Yep.
Then it becomes what we just lived through last offseason with Deshaun Watson.
Yep.
So I understand the trade, and I'm willing to give up a third-round pick only in exchange if the Raiders eat some of that salary.
Yes.
Because that contract is unworkable. And I know Loomis can do his magic to the contract, but there is money that is owed to Carr regardless. And I think the Raiders need to eat it. And we have seen teams do this. The Rams agreed to eat some of Jared Goff's ridiculous contract in exchange for the Lions to get Jared Goff.
Mm-hmm.
And for the Rams to get, of course, obviously Matthew Stafford. So that can be done, and that can cost a draft pick or give you a higher draft pick than probably what he's worth. If all things were equal and Carr was in the last year of his deal and it wasn't going to be a big cap hit, he's probably a day 3 pick, probably a 4th rounder. But because he's got a contract, because you're desperate for a quarterback, I don't have any problem giving away a 3rd rounder. Okay. I think the Saints are getting a 3rd round pick back because of compensation for losing free agents. They're only going to get 1 compensatory pick. But here's the thing about Carr, and I know what you're saying, Calvin. I get it. I'm probably giving him a 4th without the contract, but you got to get the Raiders something.
Mm-hmm.
Carr is an upgrade to what you have right now on your roster. And that was even assuming that you can bring back Andy Dalton. Okay. Andy Dalton's a free agent. But he's an upgrade over what you've got. They're not bringing back Jameis Winston. No. Jameis Winston's going to get cut. So you've got to make this move. Picking 29th, you really don't have the ammo to move up into the top 10 to get a shot at the top 3 quarterbacks. Can you go draft a Hendon Hooker? Probably. But that's a hell of a risk to take on a 26-year-old rookie coming off of a torn ACL who's only had 1 year really as a starter. And what if he gets taken right in front of you, just as Patrick Mahomes got taken in 2017? Or what if you can't trade up to get him like you couldn't trade up to get Mac Jones in 2020? That you can't play that game. I have no problem then if we get Carr that we draft a Hendon Hooker or we draft Stetson Bennett in the 7th round as a Mr. Irrelevant, just like Brock Purdy. I have no problem with that. But you can't put all your eggs in the draft basket. So you have to look at what quarterbacks are out there, what quarterbacks you can actually do something with that you're not going, okay, I have a Teddy Bridgewater, or I got a Jacoby Brissett, or I got a, I'm trying to think of another journeyman.
I'm still putting Geno Smith in that category. I know he had a wonderful year, but it was 1 year.
I'm not saying he's a Super Bowl quarterback, Calvin, but I'm not saying you're in a position to win a Super Bowl right now. You're in a transition. You're in the quarterback limbo world between franchise guys. This is the how do I put it now? This is when you're in the whole not Jim Everett, but I'm trying to think of a good period to talk about. But let's say after Dan Marino, you're in the Jay Fiedler, that kind of era of the Dolphins. you're in the okay, Phil Simms is gone, so you're going to Hostetler and you're going to, where things have to be perfect for you to do that. It's just you're not looking for a quarterback that's going to take you to the next level. You're looking for a quarterback that's going to help you win
Mm-hmm.
while you go search for that guy.
Well, that you look at, and I know you're a lifelong Steelers fan,
Mhm.
as I have been a Broncos fan. Terry Bradshaw retired in 1983.
Yep.
They got Ben Roethlisberger in 2004. That's a
Yeah.
lot of years. Now they
Yeah.
got some okay. They went to the AFC Championship game with Mark Malone. They won an AFC, then it was called AFC Central title with Cliff Stout. They went to Super Bowl 30 with Neil O'Donnell. They went to 2 championship games with Cordell Stewart. So you could still do. None of those guys are going to be confused with even
Bobby
perennial
Brister.
Pro Bowlers.
Yeah, you won some games with Bobby Brister.
Yeah, forgot about. How could I forget about the Bubster?
Yeah.
John Elway retired in 1988.
Mhm.
Now, the Broncos sold the farm, or won a bidding war for Peyton Manning in 2012. But before that, Brian, and I love Brian Griese in Denver, but he fizzled out. Jake Plummer took him to an AFC Championship game, but those guys are not franchise signal callers.
Mhm.
Jim Kelly retired in 1996. They had to wait till when did Josh Allen come? 2016?
2018.
18. Okay.
2018, yeah.
Between those times, you had Tyrod Taylor, Rob Johnson, Ryan Fitzpatrick, etc.
The Bills fans hate Wade Phillips because of Doug Flutie.
Yeah.
Doug Flutie got him to the playoffs. They benched him and put Rob Johnson in the game, and that's the Music City Miracle game. Yeah, that was their last playoff game. So
I mean, folks, not every team is going to be able to go from a Brett Favre to an Aaron Rodgers, or a Joe Montana to a Steve Young, or hell, even a Roger Staubach to a Danny White. You older fans, Danny White was a damn good quarterback. He took him to 3 straight NFC Championship games. Danny White will never be in the Hall of Fame, but he made a lot of Pro Bowls and won a lot of games. Very, very, very few franchises go from that. The odds are greater that you're going to go from a Drew Brees leaving in 2020 until 2030 or 2032 before you have another franchise signal caller. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. But history shows us that the odds are greater towards that happening than towards the latter.
You see that happening right now at the Patriots.
Yeah.
Suddenly Bill Belichick doesn't like a genius coach anymore because he lost Tom Brady. The Colts, the Indianapolis Colts, fell out of relevance immediately as soon as Burt Jones started getting hurt. 1980 was his last season there, I think it was 80. He goes, I think he went to the Rams in 81, and that was he was in terrible shape. His elbow was shot, but the Colts were a terrible team in the 80s, and then 83 they leave the city. Okay, and I'm not saying that's going to happen to the Saints at all. I'm just saying that when people are complaining because they said the Saints had opportunities to improve and fix the quarterback position, so we don't go through this mire, the quarterback carousel. And I get it. I mean, yeah, you probably could have drafted. You could have drafted Lamar Jackson in 2018 instead of taking Marcus Davenport. But do they stick with Lamar Jackson? Is Lamar Jackson what they really wanted to do? And how long does Lamar Jackson stay with the Saints before they move on from him? Baltimore redid their entire offense and built it around Lamar Jackson's abilities.
Yeah.
Taysom Hill was already on the roster. Do they turn Lamar Jackson into Taysom Hill? Because that's entirely possible. As a first-round pick, I mean, I don't know. But you're assuming that he's going to do in New Orleans what he did in Baltimore. I don't know. I would think he would, but I don't know. So it's it's so hard because you can sit there and look at the guys you miss, like Lamar Jackson, but then you look at the other guys they could have drafted and moved up to draft. Suppose they drafted Josh Rosen. Suppose they drafted I'm trying to think of some other first round busts as quarterbacks. But you bring in those kind of guys, Chad Henne, suppose they draft a guy like him. Because we were already seeing that Peyton brought in a Garrett Grayson, a Sean Canfield, maybe not as quarterbacks of the future, but he brought those guys in as quarterbacks and tried to do something with them. So it's not like it's easy to have 2020 hindsight and go back and look and say, yeah, this is the guy they should have drafted, or they should have traded up to go get Patrick Mahomes to make sure he doesn't slide past them, or no one can get up and get him. I get that, but you don't know when you're looking at the quarterbacks in this year's draft, for example. You don't know, looking right now, the guys you think are the top quarterbacks. One of them's going to be a bust.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost guaranteed. One of them's going to be a bust. Who is it going to be? You can't make that prediction now.
Yeah.
You can only make that prediction 5 years from now and see where these guys are. Yep. Zach Wilson was a sure thing in the first round. Look at him. Okay.
Yeah.
That's just how I feel when it comes to, I want to draft a quarterback. I would like to draft that young franchise quarterback, but I don't know where that guy is right now. And I don't know how to get that guy. Hell, it could be Arch Manning in Texas in 5 years.
It could. It could. And there's also a huge difference between if you're sitting with a top 1, 2, 3 draft pick and you need a quarterback. And there are quarterbacks that high on the board. Mm-hmm. You have to pick one. Yeah. You have to.
Yeah.
Because the way the rookie salary cap works, back in the day, if you missed on a first round quarterback, you handcuffed your franchise for 5 years. That was the saying. Nowadays you could still build a team around him and kind of reload your gun and take another shot in 2-3 years tops, like the Jets are about to do with Zach Wilson. But the Saints are not in that position. The Saints sit at the 29th overall pick. So to move up to get a Bryce Young or a CJ Stroud or the Will Levis, and any of those guys, the top 3 quarterbacks in this year's draft.
Mm-hmm.
For them to move up to get them, they are mortgaging their future. So if they do it and they miss, you're right back to, we've got nothing because we had to trade the future draft picks to move up and get this bust. So us mm-hmm. doing poorly is only going to benefit somebody else. So I don't know that you're in a position to make that kind of roll of the dice. I mean, if you are, I like the balls it takes to go get it. But again, if you're wrong, you have single-handedly ruined a franchise for 3 to 4 years.
Yeah. It's such the quarterback position is the hardest position in the world to evaluate because it's really up here. Mm-hmm. And you saw that interview with John Hendricks had a great interview with Jeff Ireland where he talked about interviewing Drew Brees and saying, what is it about you that made you special? And Drew Brees talked about accuracy, quick decision, and getting the ball out. Okay. And Ireland said, look, I like dual threat quarterbacks, but those are the tendencies I need to find in a quarterback. That's the stuff that can't be measured. You can measure, some accuracy by looking at film, looking at those pro day and stuff like that. But it's that drive to be better, drive to be, I want to be the master at this craft. Tom Brady had it. Drew Brees had it. Peyton Manning had it. Guys who were busts, and I'm going to pick on poor Ryan Leaf because he's an easy target. Ryan Leaf did not have it.
No.
Aaron Brooks did not have it. I pretty much ruined this ever interviewing Aaron Brooks on this show, but yeah, he didn't. He didn't have that drive to be the best quarterback he could be. He got pissed off because he wasn't named for the Pro Bowl in 2003.
Yeah.
And he sulked and pouted because of it. Um, you know, he wanted to rely on his talent, his raw talent. And that's what happens to a lot of quarterbacks who have incredible Calvin, incredible talent just oozing out of them. But for some reason, they don't make it in the NFL.
Yeah.
And they don't make it in the NFL because they're not driven. For whatever you find, whatever it is that drives you. For Drew Brees, it was you were too short, your arm's not strong enough. You always played in a spread offense, shotgun. You can't make it. For Tom Brady, it was you're skinny, you're slow. You got picked in the 6th round. You couldn't even win the starting job at Michigan. How are you going to do it in the NFL? Peyton Manning, it was just internal. It was being raised in a family of athletes. Maybe your brother picking on you constantly drove you to be a better guy. I don't know what it is. But
well, look, and you look at a guy like Derek Carr.
Yeah.
Derek Carr came from Fresno State, the younger brother of David Carr, who was the top overall draft pick. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, Derek goes in the 2nd round. Derek was called too slow, wasn't quite the prototype size. He's about 6'3", so he's just fine. Too much of a gunslinger. Derek Carr was benched for a journeyman last year, on a team that he led to the playoffs the year before amid one of the biggest coaching messes you'll ever find.
Yeah.
And Derek Carr has played for 5 different offensive coordinators in his career and 4 different head coaches, and has still put up nice numbers, which tells you that he has a good football IQ and works to learn whatever system he's in. I think those are things to keep in mind. And remember, guys, Drew Brees, and I've loved Drew Brees since Purdue. I still can't believe to this day that he wasn't a 1st-round pick. But Drew Brees with the San Diego Chargers was not highly regarded. And I mean, I knew he tore up his shoulder in his last game with the Chargers. Everybody knows that. All Saints fans know that. But there was a good chance that Drew Brees was not going to have a lot of free agent suitors anyway. Would have had more than just the Saints and Dolphins had he not torn up his arm. So he wasn't always going to be, he wasn't that guy coming into the league. He made himself into that guy. Because part of it is because he's Drew Brees. But also it was the perfect storm. He came to the New Orleans Saints, Sean Payton, the offensive system, just a special relationship between coach and player. The kind of thing that you rarely see. Derek Carr coming from the Oakland, now Las Vegas Raiders. Who's to say I'm not calling him Drew Brees either. There's only one Drew Brees. But who's to say that Derek Carr can't go somewhere in a perfect situation and just have his career skyrocket?
And to me, this is where the front office and Dennis Allen have to be on the same page and build the kind of team around Derek Carr. If Derek Carr is the guy, you build a team around a guy that plays to his strengths, and his strengths seem to match up to what you want to do anyway, which is run the football, throw some short passes to move the chains, and take the occasional deep shot to stretch, because you've got receivers who can stretch the field. But you're going to play that Drew Brees kind of offense, which Derek Carr could probably function in. Speaking of the Raiders and quarterback careers, I see some of Jim Plunkett in Derek Carr. And again, I'm not, it's so tough to compare quarterbacks over the years, but when Plunkett got picked up by the Raiders, after, his failures in New England and his failures, especially in San Francisco, where he was ready to quit after that. he was the second choice. Okay, Al Davis got fed up with Ken Stabler. He blamed Ken Stabler for declining skills in 78 and 79. That's why he traded him to Houston. And he brought in Dan Pastorini. Okay, Pastorini was a starter in 1980 until Pastorini broke his leg. Meanwhile, Plunkett came over in 79. He's the backup. He's thinking he's going to get a shot at the starting job. You get rid of Stabler, I can come in behind Stabler and I'll take over this team and I'll win with this team, just like Stabler took over from Darryl LaMonica, the Mad Bomber, in 72. You know, I'm going to take over this team and I'll be the starter. And it didn't turn out that way. Davis went and got Pastorini and made Pastorini the starter. And if Pastorini doesn't break his leg, Pastorini's leading that team to a Super Bowl, not Plunkett. So I can't be the crystal ball and say if he makes it, if he gets on this team and he's going to make this offense great and everything else like that. There's too many other things that have to be fixed on this offense.
Oh yeah.
Including the play calling. Okay. But he is a faster decision maker than Andy Dalton.
He is.
He can make better throws than Andy Dalton. I know that's not saying much, but it is. It's something to think about. Okay. Jameis Winston's not the picture. So don't even go there with Jameis Winston anymore.
Winston, I mean, you can sit here and say you love Jameis Winston, you hate Jameis Winston. You can believe that he never got a fair shot in New Orleans, and I personally don't believe that he did. All of that is irrelevant because Jameis Winston was not going to be the guy as long as Dennis Allen is the head coach. Dennis Allen is still the head coach, and we know this, if nothing else. We might not know if Derek Carr is the guy. We might not know if Jimmy Garoppolo is the guy. We might not know if a rookie is the guy. But we know this much. The New Orleans Saints need to upgrade the quarterback position. Derek Carr is one way to do that.
Yep.
All the Saints are doing is overturning a stone to see if that's the way that they want to go.
And there's nothing wrong with, once you've got Carr, like we said, to draft a guy after that. But you don't have all your eggs in that basket that Hendon Hooker, or if you want, I'm fighting with people right now about Anthony Richardson. But if you want to take a shot at Anthony Richardson, there's just people who look at pro days or look at some guy who can throw a football 80 yards in the field, on his knees and think, oh my God, this is what we need, But if you take a shot at one of these guys, you're not screwing your franchise. If they turn out to be bust, it costs you a 3rd round pick. Costs you a 4th round pick. What does it matter? Go get another one next year. You're not doing like you say, putting all your eggs in that basket, shooting for that top quarterback, and guess what? You pick the bust. You had your choice between Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud. You pick the bust out of those two.
Right.
Yeah,
You'll forever be the team that picked Sam Bowie instead of Michael Jordan. Only you traded 3 to 4 picks to do it.
Yeah, exactly. You took Ryan Leaf instead of Peyton Manning. You took instead of Drew Bledsoe, you took Rick Meyer. There's always the other guy that everyone forgets about, but that's the other guy. So, you're still shooting for draft picks. You're still shooting to go get that guy. But you also realize that, hey, I've got other holes I need to fill. We need a running back on this team, a power back. And there's a lot of power backs I really like in this draft. That there's one at 29 I'd love to get. I don't know if he's going to be there or not, but I really want to get this guy. We need defensive tackles. We need offensive linemen. We need a big physical receiver. We haven't even talked about Michael Thomas, really, but Michael Thomas, we don't know what's going to happen with him. And they specifically said, hey, you know what? We need a physical receiver to go on this team. Hell, the Raiders are about ready to get rid of their tight end, one of their receivers, and their running back. It's all open. If we're going to bring in ex-Raider coaches, bring in some X-rated players too. I'd be happy with those guys. I mean, they just there's a lot of pieces to put together. And if you don't look at it as we're building a Super Bowl team, you're looking at it as we're building a team that's going to win and have a chance of winning the division, getting in the playoffs. And once we get in the playoffs, who knows what happens after that? That's my approach with this team. Okay. I just want to get back to having a winning season, win the division, and let's see what happens after that.
Yep. Because you never know when you can get hot and go on a playoff run. And I've hated the last two playoff seasons. I mean, not that there haven't been good or decent playoff games, but when your team isn't in it, even when you have, I knew the Saints weren't going to go to the Super Bowl in 2020. I had a pretty good feeling they weren't going to go in 2019. But as you're mentally and emotionally preparing as a fan for that playoff game, you know that you have a chance because your team is still playing. I miss that feeling. And the thing that we talked about earlier, the Steelers between Bradshaw and Roethlisberger, the Broncos between Elway and Payton, as some other examples that we said. A lot of those teams that we mentioned would still be in perennial playoff contenders. A couple of them even went to Super Bowls or conference championships. Why? Because they weren't taking that foolish home run swing, blind home run swing for what they hoped would be a franchise signal caller every year. They built a team around the quarterback position. And you would see constantly changing now. And we ran down the names in Denver, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, etc. They kept trying, but they didn't mortgage their future, immediate or long term, for a risk at quarterback, and instead just took different chances. That's kind of where we're at with the New Orleans Saints right now. They have the chance. They got the extra draft pick this year. Extra draft pick next year. Still have quite a bit of talent on this roster on both sides. So you do have the opportunity to build a legitimate playoff team around whomever you bring in at quarterback.
Yeah. I mean, there's the division is pretty wide open. And we're not talking about bringing in a Kirk Cousins where you're paying $80 million for a guy that may or may not even win for you. What do the Vikings have to show for that? The Vikings have a lot of money spent and a lot of talent on that team. They've gone through 2 head coaches, and they still have nothing to show for them else in the first round of the playoffs again. So do you want to be in that? I don't want to be in that situation.
No.
And the Vikings haven't been in the Super Bowl since 1977, after the 76 season. Okay. The Miami Dolphins this season will make 50 years since they last won a Super Bowl. That was the 73 team, where they beat the Vikings. The Chiefs went 50 years.
Vikings fans, skullheads. You noticing a theme here?
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, I hate Viking fans.
Well, it's funny because the Vikings had a chance to do what the Buffalo Bills did. Go to 4 straight Super Bowls and lose 4 straight Super Bowls, because actually, it would have been 4, because it would have been 73, 74, where the Steelers beat them, 75, which was Super Bowl 10. That they didn't go to that Super Bowl because of the Hail Mary pass from Crawback to Drew Pearson, and then 76. That's when the Raiders blasted them. So can you imagine going to 4 straight Super Bowls like that, just like the Buffalo Bills did, and getting your ass kicked in 4 straight Super Bowls? And I'm telling you, I've watched those games again. Vikings offense was not competitive, and that was a high-scoring offense. And then you look at their defense, that front 4 that was so famous, and I do think that Jim Marshall belongs in the Hall of Fame.
I agree.
He deserves in the Hall of Fame, but my God, Gene Upshaw and Art Shell erased erased the Vikings defensive line. Jim Marshall didn't make a stat.
Nope.
He didn't do anything. And Wally Hilgenberg is getting pounded by Mark Van Eegen constantly in that game. It's a simple play. It's off tackle. I ran that play in playground football, basically, where the fullback goes through the hole first, picks off the linebacker, and then the running back has a decision. You either go to the inside or the outside, depending on where you are. And most time, Clarence Davis went to the outside and got huge yardage on that play. That's what you had to look at. You win 12 games, which was 14 game season, everybody. So, it's still, it didn't go to 16 games in 1978. But you win 12 games, and you're destroying teams in Minnesota. You go to the playoffs to get skull dragged by Larry Zonka and the Steel Curtain and then the Raiders. So it's just funny. It really is. So yeah, there's a lot of things. I could pick on the Vikings all day because I've watched all the Super Bowls they were in. And the only one I thought they even stood a chance against was Kansas City, and Kansas City beat them. So the other ones, they weren't even competitive. Not at all. It's just amazing to watch. It really is. Real quick, Bob, I kept you on longer than I planned on, but what do you have going on for the Bayou Blitz tomorrow?
Given the fact that the Saints are making more news than any other team, including the Super Bowl participants, who knows what we're going to have to talk about tomorrow? No doubt go over some of these coaching moves. We're really excited. Brendan managed to snag Delvin Breaux. So we're going to have Delvin Breaux on with us. Delvin has a football camp, first annual. He wants to make it a yearly thing. Has a football camp coming up, for youth, boys and girls. So I'm anxious to hear what he has to say, details about that. If you know Delvin, and Alan and I both do, Delvin has some pretty interesting things to say about Sean Payton. So I'm gonna be very interested to hear his take on what the fans' opinions of Sean leaving. It's always great to catch up with Delvin. He has a son about my son's age. He and I used to speak quite a bit through social media. Now he's quieted a little bit, but he's retired from the CFL. So he's going to be back in the New Orleans area for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm kind of interested to see what he had to say about Peyton too. So I'm going to be watching because I know that that they did not end on friendly terms. So I know about that. But Calvin strikes. Yeah, Delvin Breaux ain't gonna come on this show now because that's a Calvin.
Calvin, I love you. But we might have to mute your comments tomorrow when Delvin is on. No disrespect intended, my friend. Listen, I think Delvin would have had a very, very good career in New Orleans, if not for the injury issues. He was Julio Jones' worst nightmare. It's hard for me to say anything negative about the guy because as a person, he is such a good person.
It's funny because we've got there's at least three cornerbacks I can think of in Saints history that were all one-year wonders, and they got injured, or in one case, Ashley Ambrose's case, went to Atlanta, and then what we got was a shell of him. But you look at Delvin Breaux, you look at a guy like Keenan Lewis. Those are two guys that had that great year, and then injuries happen. Kelvin, with Keenan Lewis, that horrible knee injury that he got, and he just never was the same. Calvin, they overrated him a lot, probably because he's from Louisiana.
No doubt.
So that always helps. I mean, we talked about Bubby Brister earlier. Before we brought in Jim Everett, Bubby Brister was likely going to be the Saints starting quarterback in
Mhm.
1994. They had the contract in hand, waiting for him to sign it when they made the trade at the last minute. Then Bubby Brister's like, what happened to the contract? I thought we agreed on a contract. And, I was pissed off because I wanted Brett Favre. I remember him coming at that time. But, they were trying to recapture almost a Bobby Hebert-like thing with Bubby Brister. So getting somebody from Louisiana, even North Louisiana, to try and spark interest in the Saints again after the 93 season. So Louisiana people always get the nod. They almost always. People still are convinced that Bobby Hebert is the second or third best quarterback in Saints history. They really are. And then he's not. I'm sorry. We'd have to savage Bobby one day on the show because it's not hard to do. Ralph Marlboro and the Saints Happy Hour podcast, he can't stand Bobby.
Yeah, I know.
As a player. Anyway, Bob, thanks for sticking with us. I'm sorry I keep you up past your bedtime. If everybody who doesn't know, Bob's an hour ahead of us because he lives in Pennsylvania. So I keep him up past his bedtime when I go this late. But in the meantime, Super Bowl Sunday, Bob's got the Eagles, I got the Chiefs. Neither one of us are emotionally invested in this game whatsoever. No. Holy crap! Did Shockey just score a touchdown? We're at that point in the game. I missed ambush. Holy crap! Okay, so here comes Lance Moore. I can do the audio from NFL films every time I see this stuff. I want Lance Moore. Yep, this is the 2-point conversion. So yeah, I've watched the NFL film stuff on this way too. My favorite is always, what kind of shoes you got on?
Yeah,
I'll never let that go. That's my 65 toss power trap forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not watching the halftime show. I get it. Some people might want to see that. I haven't watched a halftime show in a long, long time. I didn't even watch The Who when the Saints were playing. I didn't watch The Who either. My brother and I kept making jokes the whole time. This Super Bowl halftime is brought to you by CBS and CSI because I think, it was CSI. It was all their intros. So. Anyway. All right, guys. Thank y'all for joining us. We'll see you next time Under the Dome. Good night, everybody.
Good night.